Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Darian and today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in November. So I know this wrap up is very late. I am sorry. I just finished my finals and during final season my brain power is essentially non-existent, so that's why I haven't been posting very many videos lately. I'm also still kind of recovering from the horrible month that was October. But I actually had a pretty good reading month in November. I did read 8 books, which is the most I've read since January, I think. I did DNF one of those books, but it's fine. So without further ado, let's just get into the books that I read in November. So the first book I read was for school, and that is Voyage in the Dark by Jean Rhys. This is a book from the 1930s. I think it's about this girl named Anna who was living in the Caribbean, and after the death of her father she is sent to live in England, and she meets an older man that she starts a relationship with, and it just kind of goes from there. I don't want to say too much because this is a really short book. It's like 100 and it's like less than it's like 150 pages, so I feel like if I say more than that it just kind of gives away the whole book. But this book was fine. It definitely was one of the better books that we read in class, but I didn't love it or anything. I thought it was a very interesting book, and I did have to write part of my final paper on this book, so it was interesting. I really don't have much to say about it. I mean, we had some interesting discussions about it in class. Honestly, it feels like I read this ages ago, so I don't even remember too much about it, even though I just wrote a paper on it, but it's fine. But I gave this book 3 stars. I didn't hate it or anything. I was also reading this like in the midst of all the horrible things that were going on at the end of October, because I did start this at the end of October and finished it at the beginning of November, so I just really don't have much to say on it. It was an interesting book. I had never heard of it before, so if you're interested in picking this up, go ahead. I will say trigger warnings for dangerous abortion in this book, so be mindful of that. But yeah, check it out if you want. I don't know. All of a sudden it just got so bright outside. I don't know what happened, but the next book I finished in November was Payback's a Witch by, who was it by? Lana Harper. This was the Winer's Book Club pick for October, and this book was something. You're following this girl named Emmy who moved out from her hometown when she was like 18, 19? I don't remember. And it's been like 10 years or 9 years since she moved out. She moved to Chicago, and her family is actually a family of witches. In her hometown there's like 4 families of witches, and her family has like the weakest magical powers. So when she moved away she kind of lost her magic, but then she is called back to her hometown because every 50 years I think there's this competition, and one member from each of the families, each of the magical families, have to compete, except since Emmy's family is the least powerful, they actually kind of like host the competition instead of participating. And I can't remember why Emmy is the one who has to do it, but she's the one who has to do it. So she comes back, and she hasn't been back to her hometown in like 5 years, so she hasn't even seen her family in 5 years or her friends. And like the reason she moved was after a traumatic breakup, and like when I heard that I was like, oh my god, like what did this guy do? Did he cheat? Did he do something like even worse than that? I was so ready for the tea, and then it turns out that the horrible thing he did to her was break up with her. And like, yeah, he's a jerk, and trust me, I know how traumatic breakups can be, but I was expecting more than that. And and they had only been dating for like 2 months, and they were never really that serious, so I didn't understand why that was a big enough reason for her to want to move away and not see her family anymore. Like, it just made no sense to me. This book was just, it was just not for me. Also, when she moves back to town, she finds out that not only did her best friend date this guy who wronged her all those years ago, but also one of the girls that she went to high school with, who again she hasn't seen since she moved away, he was cheating on her best friend with this girl, and neither of the girls knew. So all 3 of them have been wronged by this guy, and he is the one from his family who is competing in this competition. So they decide to team up and try to bring him down, and by extension bring his family down. So like that aspect of the book I liked, but also like I just found all the characters felt very flat to me, especially this like horrible boyfriend. I don't understand how any of them saw anything in him. Like, how did he manage to get these 3 girls to want to date him? Like, his whole personality was just that he was a jerk and a douchebag. So I was like, where's the appeal? I don't know. So this book was just really not for me. We did have a pretty fun time talking about this book in our live show though, so I will leave that link down below in case you missed it. But yeah, I had really high hopes for this book. Also, I forgot to mention that there is a romance between the main girl and not her best friend, but the other girl that this guy wronged. So it's sapphic, which is great, but also like, I don't know, I didn't really feel any chemistry between them, so I don't know. This just fell flat for me and I gave it 2 stars. It was really disappointing and I was really excited for this, especially because I read it like during Halloween time, and it just really disappointed me. So I don't really recommend this one, but you can pick it up if you want, I guess. But there are definitely better sapphic books out there, so I'd probably read one of those instead. Okay, I just looked at my notes and I realized that Payback's a Witch I gave 2.5 stars, not 2 stars. But honestly, it might be a 2 stars. But anyways, the next book that I read in November was The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. When I saw that my library had this, my library does not have the best audiobook selection. So when I saw they had this, I was like, a new release that I actually want to read? Okay, so I borrowed it, and first of all, this might be the most depressing book I've ever read. Like, if you read The Nightingale, that's the only other book I've read by Kristen Hanna, so I know she likes to write depressing stories, but I found this even more depressing than The Nightingale, if that was even possible. So this book follows this woman. What's her name? What's her name? I don't remember her name, but you're following this woman and she meets this guy and they kind of start this fling. Oh, this is in like the 1920s, by the way. They start this fling and she ends up getting pregnant, and so her family basically disowns her, so she goes to live with this guy's family, and then it kind of cuts to like 10-ish years later and she has 2 kids and she's still living with her now husband and his parents, and then the Great Depression happens and they're living on this farm and they're trying their best to kind of keep their crops going because that's how they make a living. But this also takes place during the Dust Bowl, so there is this drought going on, so they basically have no crops and their money is running out. They are just really struggling to live, and it follows them as they try to decide whether to stay with their family and stay with their crops and just hope that the rain will come and everything will work out, or if they should move out west to California because they hear that life in California is much better and there's more jobs there. So I don't really want to say more than that because this book definitely takes some turns, and oh my god, this book was depressing. Like, I will say, obviously this book is really well written. It's Kristen Hanna. She is an amazing writer, and so the prose of this book was beautiful, but the words were not so beautiful. Oh my god. It's like this family could not catch a break, first of all. I can't remember the main character's name. Elsa? It was Elsa, I think. I will confirm. Editing me will confirm. But her older daughter, I think, is 12 at the beginning, or not the beginning of the book, but after you cut to like the Great Depression, her daughter is 12 or 13, and she's such a brat to her mom for so much of this book, and I'm like, your mom is trying to have you all survive and you're being so rude to her. And like, she eventually comes around, like I knew she would, but oh my god. And I know she's just acting like a typical 12-year-old girl, but she bothered me so much for so much of this book. I just wanted to slap her and be like, appreciate your mom. But anyways, the characters in this book just felt really real and really fleshed out, and so the writing of this book was amazing. It's just not the best book to listen to when you're going through a hard time like I was. Like, I cannot stress enough how depressing this book is. There's really no respite at any point. It's just bad thing, one after another. Here's another bad thing. Oh, you thought things are looking up? No, they're not. Like, at least in The Nightingale, I felt like there was still hope throughout the book, even though bad things kept happening. But in this book, I was like, there's no hope, like, which I know, like, is how it felt living through the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, so, like, it was definitely very accurate, don't get me wrong, but it was quite depressing. So I want to stress that before you go into this book, that it's not a happy book, it's just very depressing. But I did enjoy it in the sense that it was written really well and I really cared about the characters. It was a little bit too long for me. I can't remember how long the audiobook was, but I think it could have been cut down just a little bit. But overall, still a great book. I did like The Nightingale a little bit more, but I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Okay, next. I'm so excited to talk about this book. The next book I read was The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas, and oh my god, this book was so good. Oh my god. So obviously everyone is raving about this book right now, especially my friends Casey and Lisa. They were pushing me to read this, and I knew this was the type of book I wanted to read in November after everything that happened in October, and it did not disappoint me. Honestly, for like the first maybe quarter of the book, I was like, oh, I don't know if this is 5 stars, it might be 4.5 stars. Like, I was loving it, but it took me kind of a while to warm up to the main character, but then I was like, oh, this is 5 stars, obviously. So you're following this girl. Oh my god, I keep forgetting these characters' names. What's her name? Lena. Lena? That sounds right. You're following this girl named Lena, and her sister's wedding is coming up, and it's going to be taking place in Spain because that's where she's from and that's where her family's from. But she moved away from Spain kind of similarly to Payback's a Witch. She moved away after like kind of this traumatic thing happened, and she just wanted to get away from her family and people that she knew to kind of make a fresh new start in New York, I want to say. But this book is much better than Payback's a Witch, just so you know. But she's working at this company, and one of her co-workers, Erin Blackford, the love of my life, love him so much. They kind of have this like not even a rivalry, like they just don't really like each other, but like it's really just her that doesn't like him. Like he just kind of acts indifferent towards her, but she is looking for a date to her sister's wedding because of everything that happened when she left. She feels like it will be super awkward if she shows up alone, and she doesn't want to deal with her family like fussing over her that she doesn't have a boyfriend. So she tries to find a fake boyfriend to go with her to Spain, and the only person who offers his services is Erin Blackford himself, the man of my dreams. I love him so much. If you love grumpy boys, this man is grumpy. Love it. But he ends up offering to go with her to Spain, and it's enemies to lovers, but also like not really enemies to lovers because she's really the only one that doesn't like him. And it's also fake dating, which I love. Like, enemies to lovers and fake dating is the perfect combination. I love it so much, and this book was just so good. I loved, oh my god, I cannot stress this enough how much I loved Erin Blackford. Erin Blackford. But yeah, like the hype is definitely real for this book, and this was a debut, so I can't wait to see what else Elena Armas writes. And she is writing a companion novel to this book following Lena's best friend, so I can't wait to read that. And oh my god, it was so good. It was so funny, and like the banter between these two was just amazing, and I loved when they were in Spain, and it was just such a fun book. It was definitely what I needed to read in November, so I'm telling you, the hype is real for this book. Please pick it up if you can. It's so good, and I gave this 5 stars, obviously. I loved it. It made me smile. It made me so happy. And also, I didn't mind the steamy scenes in this. Normally I have trouble reading steamy scenes, but the connection between these two main characters, it just really, like, I actually didn't mind them. So yeah, so I gave this 5 stars. It was great. Highly recommend. I'm pretty sure this was my favorite book of the month. But yeah, there you go. Read it. Okay. The next book I read in November was very different from The Spanish Love Deception. It was Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner, and if you didn't know, Michelle Zauner is the lead singer of the band Japanese Breakfast, who I'd only heard like I've heard of them before I picked this book up, but I hadn't listened to any of their music. And then when I finished the book, I started listening to their music, and I love them now. So highly recommend Japanese Breakfast. But Michelle Zauner, this is her memoir, and she writes about losing her mother to cancer a few years ago, and she kind of goes back and forth talking about her childhood with her mother and the rest of her family, and also present day, and just what it was like grieving for her mother and still grieving for her. This was such a personal book. Like, it almost felt, I listened to the audiobook and Michelle Zauner narrates it herself, which I love. Not only do I love when authors narrate their own books, but especially when it's a memoir or a nonfiction, like I feel like that's the best audiobook is when the author narrates it. So I really liked the audiobook, and this story was just, like I said, it felt so personal. It almost felt wrong to listen to sometimes. Like, it almost felt too personal. She really goes into details, like talking about her mother and as her condition worsened, and she talks about the day that her mother died, and it was just so heartbreaking. Such a heartbreaking story. Oh my god. So again, I recommend maybe don't listen to this when you're not in the best place, because especially like if you've lost a parent or someone else close to you, like she really goes into the detail of her grief. So just keep that in mind, like take care of yourselves. But I thought this was written really well. I did end up giving this book 4 stars instead of 5 stars, and I always question whether I should rate nonfictions, because like especially memoirs, because my rating has nothing to do with like the actual story. Like I'm not gonna rate her life, and I'm not rating how she responded to her mother's death. Like that's not my rating depends on. It's solely on the writing, and I don't think writing is like her main passion in life. I'm pretty sure it's her music. I did love the writing in this, but it did sometimes kind of feel like she was just kind of listing things that happened. Like sometimes she would talk about like the food she went to buy or something like that. And first of all, I loved the descriptions of food in this book. It made me so hungry. But something that I should mention is Michelle Zauner is Korean American, so she also discusses like some racism that she has experienced throughout her life, and I thought that aspect to the book was really interesting. And there's a lot of talk about the Korean foods and recipes that she eats in this book, and loved the descriptions of food. But I will say sometimes it did seem like she was just like listing things that happened. Like it was kind of like, we did this and then we did this, and then I went to talk to this person and then we did this. So sometimes like I found my mind just kind of like thinking of other things because I wasn't as engaged when she was describing things like that. But still, the story, like it's so worth it to listen to. And I think this is also the nonfiction baddies pick for December. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is. So there's still time for you guys to read it if you want to watch that live show. But yeah, so I'm really glad I read this, but it was definitely very depressing, and I do recommend it, but please make sure you're in the right headspace to read this because it is quite sad. But yeah, so 4 stars, really enjoyed it. Okay, so next we have the book that I DNF'd in November, and this was another book for school. So I know everything that happens in this book because I had to write like a response to it. So I did Spark Notes the second half of this book because like the writing style in this book just did not agree with me. I did not understand a lot of what was going on, so I had to put it down because I knew I was just kind of wasting my time trying to understand what was going on, and instead like I just caught myself up by looking up the summary of the book online and also just listening in class to what my teacher said, and she made me understand it so much better than I could. Anyways, that book is Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. You're following the main character who actually doesn't have a name, so it's not that I forgot it, it's that his name is never shared in the book, and you're following him throughout his life, and he's a black man living in America, and he experiences a lot of racism. This is in the 1950s, I think. It might be even earlier. So he's living in the South in America, so he's experiencing some really awful racism, obviously, and this book was just really hard to read sometimes. And there is, I do want to mention, because I didn't know this going into the book, there is one scene where incest is described, and there are a lot of details, and that was honestly one of the most disturbing things I've ever read. So it's like a whole chapter talking about this experience, and it was pretty awful to read, so please keep that in mind when you're reading this book. There's also obviously trigger warnings for racism and police brutality in this book, so keep those in mind. But that was one of the reasons I didn't want to finish it, because I was left feeling so like traumatized after reading that one scene. So you're following the main character as he goes through school, and he ends up having to leave school early, and he moves to New York. So I feel like I can't really explain this book very well. I'm really bad at talking about books that I read for school, but the writing in this just was not working for me, so I DNF'd it like maybe 200 pages in. I don't remember, but I really don't have much to say about it. I definitely can see the important merits of this book. Like, it is definitely commenting on racism in America, which is obviously very important and very relevant still today. I just had a lot of trouble with this, so that's why I DNF'd it, even though I do know the whole story of the book. I don't know what else to say. So the last 2 books that I read in November, I'm actually going to talk about them together because these are 2 books that I read for the secret TBR that I've been working on for months and months. I know everyone is sick of me talking about this freaking secret TBR, and trust me, the wait will not be worth it. I'm gonna post the video eventually. You're gonna be like, oh, okay. So I'm very sorry that it's taking so long, and I'm even more sorry that it's not gonna be interesting, but I'm almost done it, I promise. So you'll see my thoughts on these books soon. But those books are Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel and The Mighty Heart of Sunny St. James by Ashley Herring Blake. So I'm just gonna talk a bit about what these books are about, but I'm not gonna give you my thoughts. So Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel, I actually don't want to say too much about this book because I feel like it's really best going into this not knowing much, but at the beginning of the book there's this little girl who stumbles upon this giant metal hand in the woods, and people have no idea where it came from, and then it kind of goes forward in time, and that little girl grows up to be like this super smart scientist, and she's actually working on like this top secret mission case, I don't know what to call it, but investigation, I guess, on this metal hand, because they have started to find more of these giant metal body parts throughout the world, and they're trying to kind of put them together to see if it makes something. And this is also told in like interview format. I don't know if you can see that. So there's someone mysterious who is interviewing our main characters, and you don't know who they are. I assume by the end of the series you find out who they are, but that's all I'm gonna say. It's really hard not talking about this book. That's all I'm gonna say. I can't even say if I recommend it or not, but that's what it's about. Okay. And then The Mighty Heart of Sunny St. James follows this young girl named Sunny St. James, and she has recently had a heart transplant because she had a very serious heart condition, but the transplant was successful, and now she is trying to learn how to live after this surgery, because for a while in her life she wasn't able to do much because of her condition. So now she kind of sets goals for herself for this new life that she wants to have. There are a lot of aspects to this book. One of them is that she lives with this woman named Kate, who is her mother figure. Her biological mom gave her up when she was a little girl because she was an alcoholic and she didn't feel like she was fit to raise Sunny. So Kate is actually one of her biological mom's friends, and so Kate is the one who raised her. But after her transplant, her mom wants to try to come back into Sunny's life. So Sunny is dealing with that. She is also dealing with the fallout she recently had with her best friend, and so she is looking for a new best friend. So she meets this girl named Quinn. Another one of her goals is to find a boy and kiss him, but as her friendship grows with Quinn, she starts to wonder maybe she wants to kiss girls? Question mark? So yeah. I can't say what I thought about these books, which is really hard, but stay tuned for that video for my thoughts. I promise it's coming. I promise. But yeah, okay. So those are all the books that I read in November. Let me know if you've read any of these books, what you thought about them. What was your favorite book that you read in November? Let me know in the comments down below. But thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon with another video soon. Bye!